She looked up with a blink of disbelief. You're 60, Walt. You don't reboot at 60. You retire. At 60, he went back to school to chase a dream. 10 years later, the woman who mocked him asked for a job at his company. But before we start the video, let us know where you're watching this video, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe Story Store, and please share your thoughts about this story in comment section. Next, I stood up, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. The woman behind the glass door glanced at the paper in her hand, her eyes pausing on my name longer than usual. She looked up with a blink of disbelief. Mr. Greaves? Walter Greaves. Yes, I said, straightening my tie and smoothing my silver hair. The young woman blinked again. Right this way. I followed her down a sleek hallway lined with plaques and motivational posters. The air smelled of citrus polish and ambition. She opened a glass door and gestured inside. Good luck, she said, though her voice sounded like she wasn't sure if I'd need it, or if it would even help. I stepped in and froze. She was already seated at the table, flipping through her resume, a cup of coffee steaming beside her. Her posture was confident, her hair slightly shorter than I remembered, but I knew that face. Amanda Lark, the same Amanda who had laughed a decade ago when I announced I was going back to school. Walter Greaves, she had said back then. You're 60. You don't reboot at 60. You retire. But this time, she hadn't seen me yet. I took a seat across from her. She glanced up, and recognition hit like a thunderclap. Her smile flickered, then vanished. Mr. Greaves will be interviewing you today, the assistant said. Amanda's lips parted slightly. She wasn't sure what to say. Neither was I, so I let the silence do the talking. At last, I reached for her resume. Next candidate, please, I said, my voice steady. And just like that, the tables had turned. The first day I stepped onto Hartwell University's campus, I stuck out like a sore thumb, and not just because of my gray hair and the creak in my knees. Everyone around me buzzed with youth, earbuds in, coffee in hand, talking about classes I'd never heard of. In orientation, I was the only one carrying a leather notebook instead of a laptop. The welcome session was filled with nervous freshmen, and me, a 60-year-old with arthritis and a fresh backpack. Then Amanda Lark walked in. She wasn't a student. She was a guest speaker, fresh off the success of her third startup. She strode to the front like she owned the place, blazer sharp, heels sharper. Everyone leaned in as she spoke about disruption, hustle, and how college was more a networking playground than a classroom. I was in the front row, taking notes like my life depended on it. After her talk, I approached her to say thanks. She glanced at me, then at my notes. You know this isn't a book club, right? She said, smirking. I smiled, refusing to shrink. I know exactly what this is, I replied. She laughed, loud, dismissive, and final. To her, I was just an old man clinging to a lost dream. But that laugh stayed with me, not as a wound, more like fuel. Because sometimes, the best motivation sounds like mockery. College hit harder than I expected. My first programming class felt like I'd stumbled into a foreign language boot camp. Loops, variables, syntax errors, it was all gibberish. I bombed the first quiz. On the day midterms were returned, I sat in my car clutching a failing grade and cried like I hadn't in decades. I considered quitting more than once. But then came Zane. He was loud, brilliant, and had blue hair that changed shades every week. Sat next to me one day and said, "You overthink things, Walt. Code's just Lego for grown-ups." He started helping me after class. That's when I met Marla. Quiet, fierce, juggling classes, work, and a 6-year-old son. We formed a study group, more like a survival pact. We'd meet in the library or an empty cafe, fueled by instant coffee and vending machine snacks. Nights blurred into mornings. Debugging sessions turned into therapy talks. We were wildly different, but we were all fighting for something. You're not too old, Walt. Marla once told me, eyes red from no sleep. You're just ahead of your time. Slowly, things began to click. Code that once looked like chaos started to feel like rhythm. I stopped trying to catch up and started building. I wasn't just learning to program. I was learning to believe in myself again. We shouldn't even be here, Marla whispered, eyeing the crowd of hoodie-clad 20-somethings surrounding us. The room buzzed with excitement and Red Bull fumes. Laptops were already open, whiteboards filled with complex diagrams. We're here, I said, adjusting my glasses. We finish, no matter what. Zane was practically vibrating with energy. Let's give them something they haven't seen before. Asterisk, we weren't there to win. We were there to prove we belonged. Our idea was simple, a budgeting app for caregivers and retirees, people like us who didn't fit the usual user profile. While others built flashy tech for Gen Z influencers, we focused on practicality, empathy, and dignity. The next 48 hours were a blur. Code, coffee, crashes, late-night pep talks. At one point, Marla fell asleep sitting up with her fingers still on the keyboard. Zane patched bugs like a madman. I kept the vision clear. We didn't place. No trophy. No cash prize. But something unexpected happened. People noticed. Mentors, judges, even other teams came by to ask about our project. A few said, "My dad could use this," or "That's actually a great idea." A week later, I got an email from a professor. "This has potential. Come see me." That was the first time I let myself think, maybe this could be real. The conference room smelled like espresso and nerves. We stood in front of 5 angel investors, each more unreadable than the last. Zane paced like a caged animal. Marla clutched my sleeve so tightly I lost feeling in my hand. As for me, I was terrified, but I smiled anyway. Our slides loaded. Glitchy and basic. Nothing flashy. Just our story, our numbers, and a problem we knew intimately. "This isn't just an app," I began, voice shaking at first. "It's a lifeline. A budgeting tool built for the people no one's building for, retirees, caregivers, the overlooked." We shared our journey, how we met, why we built it, the feedback we'd received. Marla talked about raising her son while caring for her mother. Zane explained our architecture with surprising clarity. Then silence. One investor leaned back. Another scribbled something. A third finally leaned forward and asked, "What happens if you fail?" I took a breath. "Then we try again. Because the people this app is for, they don't get many second chances. But we do." That cracked something. The man in the center nodded slowly. "I'm in." The others followed. We walked out stunned, a little shaky, and completely changed. That was the moment CareWise was born, not just as an idea, but as a future. 3 years later, I stood in a sleek office, blazer replacing my old hoodie. The company had grown beyond my wildest dreams. CareWise was no longer just a project. It was a lifeline for thousands. Interviews came pouring in. Reporters asked about the unexpected success story, the man who dared to start over at 60. I never mentioned Amanda. Not once. Even when she wrote that viral article. Why? Late bloomers should bloom elsewhere. Zane scoffed one afternoon, waving his phone. "You gonna respond to that?" I shook my head. "No. Let the work speak." And speak it did. Our user base exploded. Partnerships formed. Investors smiled wider. I was living proof that age wasn't a deadline, it was a starting line. But beneath the wins was a quiet feeling. Validation wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every late starter who doubted themselves. Amanda's laugh, sharp and dismissive, was still in my memory. But now, it was a reminder, not a wound. One morning, an email popped up. Lark Tech wanted to talk merger. Zane burst out laughing. "You think that's her?" I smiled quietly. Only one way to find out. When the email from Lark Tech hit my inbox, I almost deleted it without reading. But curiosity got the better of me. Interested in discussing a potential acquisition of CareWise. Lark Tech. The name sent a jolt down my spine. "Is that Amanda's company?" I asked Zane later. He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. Only one way to find out. The meeting was set in a glass-walled conference room downtown. I sat stiffly, replaying memories. Amanda's laughter, her words, her skepticism. When she walked in, it was like no time had passed. Amanda Lark, sharp as ever, confident, polished. "Walter Greaves," she said, extending a hand that held no apology. I shook it firmly. "Amanda." We cut through pleasantries fast. She was there to negotiate, but I could see something else in her eyes, a hint of respect, maybe even a trace of nostalgia. The pitch was polished, impressive. Lark Tech was struggling, and they saw CareWise as the lifeline. But as talks went on, red flags appeared. Internal conflicts, rumors I hadn't expected. Still, I kept my guard up. The deal could change everything. Or it could be the start of a lesson I'd never forget. Amanda walked into the room like she owned it, confident, poised, and with that familiar spark in her eyes. She hadn't aged a day, at least not on the surface. But something was different. The sharpness was still there, but it was tempered by a new kind of caution. Walter Greaves, she said, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. Still chasing dreams? I met her gaze evenly. Still catching them. We sat down, the air thick with unspoken history. I remembered how she'd laughed at me 10 years ago, dismissing my plans like they were foolish whims. Now, here she was, trying to buy into what I'd built. She launched into the pitch, her voice smooth and persuasive. Larktech had resources, connections, and a team ready to scale Carewise fast. But beneath her words, I sensed desperation. Halfway through, she laughed. A quick, sharp laugh I hadn't heard in years. It was the same laugh that once echoed through lecture halls when I was the odd one out. But this time, it wasn't mocking. It was nervous. As the meeting wrapped, Amanda's guard dropped just a bit. "Walter, you've done something incredible. I want to be part of that." I smiled. "We already are." Behind that smile was a quiet question. Could people really change? Or was this just another game? Only time would tell. Just 6 months after our talks began, everything fell apart. The merger with Larktech was off. News broke that the company had been tangled in internal fraud. Executives fired. Amanda was out. The headlines were brutal. One day she was on magazine covers. The next, she was a cautionary tale in blogs and podcasts. I watched it all unfold, quietly, feeling a strange mix of sympathy and vindication. Life had a way of humbling even the proudest. One afternoon, the receptionist buzzed me. "There's a Ms. Lark here. She says it's urgent." I paused, heart skipping. "Send her in." Amanda appeared in my office looking nothing like the powerhouse I remembered. No blazer, no confident smile, just a woman worn thin by failure and regret. She sat down slowly, eyes meeting mine with an unspoken apology. "You built something real, Walt," she said, voice soft. And I lost it all. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then I asked, "What do you want now?" She looked down, hesitated, and finally said, "A second chance." I studied her quietly. We both knew this was more than a job interview. It was a test, one I wasn't sure I was ready to pass. Amanda sat across from me, no longer the confident entrepreneur who'd once dismissed my dreams. Instead, she looked smaller somehow, humbled, worn by loss, but still sharp beneath the surface. "You built something real, Walt," she said quietly, her eyes searching mine. And I lost it all. Her words hung in the air. I saw the weight she carried, the regret wrapped inside that simple sentence. "What are you hoping for?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "A second chance. To learn. To rebuild. With you." The room felt charged with unspoken history. Years of mockery, defiance, and now, this fragile truce. Zane and Marla had been skeptical when I told them I was considering hiring Amanda. "Are you sure?" Zane had said. "After everything?" But I knew the value of second chances, not just for her, but for me. "I'll bring you on as a consultant," I said. "You'll prove your worth. Earn your place." Her relief was palpable, but so was her determination. In the weeks that followed, Amanda adapted quickly. She listened more than she talked, learned faster than expected, and brought fresh ideas. One afternoon, she pulled me aside. "Walt," she said softly, "you were right all along." I smiled, the moment settling between us like a bridge. "No, Amanda," I replied. "We both were." Hiring Amanda was a gamble. Zane raised an eyebrow, and Marla stayed quiet, uncertain. "Why bring her on after everything?" Zane asked. "One afternoon, she was your biggest skeptic." I looked at them both. "Because everyone deserves the chance I gave myself. A shot to start over." Amanda arrived on day one as a consultant, her posture humbler than before. No grand entrances or flashy ideas, just a quiet determination to prove she belonged. She worked hard, soaking up new knowledge, asking questions, and gradually earning respect. Her previous confidence had softened into something steadier, wiser. One day, after a long meeting, Amanda stayed behind. "Walter," she said, voice low, "I owe you an apology." I raised an eyebrow. "For laughing at you. For doubting. You. You were right. Age doesn't define what you can do." I smiled. "Thank you, Amanda. That means more than you know." The team noticed the change too. Amanda's ideas began to shape projects. Her insights opened doors we hadn't considered. What once felt like a rivalry evolved into partnership. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about respect, growth, and redemption. And for the first time in a long time, I felt we were building something truly unbreakable, together. Standing on the TED stage, I looked out at the sea of faces, young, old, and everything in between. Amanda sat in the front row, her smile steady, proud. They laughed when I said I was going back to school at 60, I told the crowd. But life doesn't care how old you are. It only cares if you're willing to begin. The applause was thunderous, but what struck me most was the question from a woman in the back, her hand raised shyly. I'm 70, she said. Is it too late to start? Never, I answered, feeling every word deep in my bones. Behind me, Amanda handed out business cards, our business cards. CareWise was still growing, still helping those who'd been overlooked. Our journey wasn't about age or setbacks or even success. It was about resilience and the courage to keep moving forward. Looking back, the laughter, the doubts, the struggles, they were all part of the story. They fueled the fire that lit this path. Amanda and I shared a glance, one filled with respect and understanding. Once rivals, now partners. The company was thriving, but more importantly, the story was still unfolding. Because some journeys don't end, they only get more interesting. And as long as there's breath, there's always a next chapter.